Hello everyone, this is Flegs, and I'm going to be playing a game of Dominions 5. So Dominions 5 is a 4X game. I would maybe consider it kind of in between Civilization and Total War. The world map is divided up into areas called provinces, and you move between them kind of like Civ, but when you fight armies, it does go into a battle map like Total War, but you don't have quite as much control, and you'll see all this in game. I'm just saying this because I don't think this is a particularly well-known game, so a lot of people this might be like their first exposure to the game. I've been playing the game not for too long, so I kind of know what's going on, but I'm not great. Anyways, we're just going to go ahead and dive in. I'll try to explain the game as I go along. It's not really going to be like a tutorial depth explanation, just hopefully well enough that everyone can enjoy the, viewing the game and whatnot and spectating it. So, we're going to play on a random map. And I think we'll keep all of this default, medium, 15 provinces per player. Normal amount of water, all this enabled. So one thing to note, this game supports wraparound on the map, which for east and west, for example, it means the left and right side of the map connect. So you're playing essentially on a cylinder, and you can continuously move east or west, and you'll eventually end up back where you started. You can also enable north and south wraparound. I think both of these have advantages and drawbacks. If you enable both of them, it's cool because you don't have like a corner of the map you can hide in and get like this kind of artificial defense bonus. At the same time, it makes the map feel smaller for any given number of provinces, just because there's the shortest distance is like half the width of the map to any point. Okay, so we get to select the age we want to play in. You can pause it and read these blurbs if you want, but basically it says that in the early ages magic is more prevalent, and it kind of peters out toward the late ages. It's not that there isn't magic, it's just that there's not quite as much like magical beasts and as much like abundance of mages. I haven't played it enough to really get the best idea of how the distribution changes and whatnot, but also armor and weapons become more advanced in the late ages, so it kind of makes that shift. But we're going to start in the early ages. I figure if I do another video of this game, we'll do middle ages and then late ages, and maybe we'll just keep doing that, but for now we're going to start in early ages. And I'm going to do a 4-player game, just me and 3 computers. So I'm going to keep them on normal difficulty, and I'm going to set them to random land nations, so we're all going to play land nations. And I'm going to select my nation, so I think this is about 30 nations for early age. This game has a lot of nations, and they're all pretty unique. It's not like everyone's humans and you just like, change something up, like these people have better cavalry and these people have better archers. They all have completely unique unit rosters, and some of them will have, unique features to their empire. So I should go ahead and say what the point of this game is. Basically the lore is that there's like a single god called the Pantocrator, and this god suddenly disappears, and there's a void where he existed, and all these pretender gods rise up with nations following them, and they're all vying to become the new Pantocrator. So you're trying to ascend your pretender god into godhood, and that's how you win the game. but how you, there are different game modes to how you achieve that ascension. So I was just thumbing through these earlier, and I thought I'd play Fomoria. We'll get to see their little description screen in a moment. So 4 players, and that looks good. So here's the nation of Fomoria. The bountiful land of Fomoria was claimed by giants who once guarded the dark and stormy ocean realm of the drowned dead. With death ever near, their loyalties had changed and their malice grown. With the ascendancy of a previous pantocrator, they were punished for their sins and banished from their dark home. The full effects of the curse became evident when the Fomorians settled in a fertile land. Their offspring were short and cursed with monstrous appearance. The few surviving Fomorian giants saw their once proud race degenerate and die. Then came the invasions. Partholonians, Nemedians, Furbolg, and Tuatha all claimed the land of Fomoria. Twice the Fomorians were all but defeated by foreign magic, but twice they conjured a plague that slew the invaders. The third wave of invaders, the Furbolg, accepted Fomorian rule and aided the giants in defeating the Tuatha. Now Furbolg compose much of the Fomorian population. Fomorians are skilled shipwrights, powerful stormcrafters, and have a legacy of mastery over the dead. So, race, malformed Fomorian giants, Furbolg, remnant Nemedians, ocean sailing, and units able to enter the sea. So ocean sailing is kind of unique for land nations, which means you can pass over ocean tiles or water tiles. Not everyone can do that. There are water nations. As you saw, I said everyone to a land nation, but there are aquatic nations that are either like amphibious and can go ocean or land, and then there are ones that are almost purely like ocean dwelling nations. Military, Furbolg infantry, Fomorian infantry, Nemedian infantry. So we don't have any cavalry or magical beasts or anything. We do have giants, so that's pretty neat. Magic, air, death, some water and nature. Priest, mostly weak, Fomorian king of average skill. Building giant forts. So one thing I should say is there's quite a bit of lore to be learned from reading all of these. I haven't read through all of the nations. I've only read through a pretty small subset, honestly. And the nations will change or even collapse between the ages, so I don't remember if Fomoria exists in the Middle Ages. I want to say they don't. I could be wrong. But you might see them in another nation's history that rose from like their collapse or something, and some nations will go on to other ages, but they'll be changed somehow. Anyways, down here you're looking at, these are our commanders. So these are, well, they're called commanders because they can command troops, and these are the units that can move around the world map. These are our soldiers essentially, and they are either garrisoned in a province or they are in a commander's army. They can't move independently. A commander has to lead them around. And these are the 2 magical sites that our capitals start with. So we have this one that allows the recruitment of these units, which means these units can only be recruited in our capital. And it gives us some gems that are used for magic. And this is pretty much the same thing, just in different units and different gems. So we get 2 death gems, 1 air gem, 2 air gem, and 1 water gem. And we can find more magic sites in the game if we search for them, which we will be doing. But that's what we start out with. So I didn't do a thorough look through the units when I decided to play this race earlier, so I'm going to look through each of them and just kind of explain what you're seeing in a unit's, what do you want to call this, their description page. So basically every nation has a cheap scout, stealthy. So that means with 50 units patrolling in a province, there's a roughly 50% chance that this unit will be discovered. Not all units have a stealthy rating, so they literally can't try to stealth. Mountain survival and forest survival. I believe that just means we can pass through it more easily and use less supplies. Able to move through mountain passes when it is not too cold. Forest is similar. They're going to use less supplies in forest and move through them more quickly. So, okay, we actually have access to 2 scouts. That's kind of unique. Not all nations have that. So, he is less stealthy. I'm not exactly sure. He's more expensive, less stealthy. Might be a better fighter. For a scout, I don't really see much purpose in having him unless he has more map move. That could be a possibility. So he's a little faster on the map, but doesn't seem like this is really that useful of a unit. It's more expensive. I guess to note about this game, from what I've seen of it, it's not really like, you know, some esports balance game where every nation is like, you know, really, really well thought out to be able to oppose each other nation in a very even match or anything like that. This guy could just be here for flavor, essentially, or I could just be missing some obvious use for him. So here's our first, like, you know, leader of soldiers. He's got a leadership of 60. That's how many people he can lead around. He doesn't give them any morale bonuses, though. I think that starts at 80. So he's just very basic. He doesn't even have any special traits, so there's really not much to say about him. So pretty much the same thing, only a Fomorian. It kind of seems like we have one of each unit for the Fomorians and the Furbolgs. Okay, so this guy has a leadership of 80, which means he does have a morale bonus, and he can, to his squads, and he can have up to 3 squads instead of 2 without having any penalties to morale. Otherwise, there's not too much to note except he is a priest. So, he's a priest and he is sacred. Priest means that he can bless sacred units on the battlefield. Sacred units receive the blessing of our god, which we will customize our god later, so you will see that. Also, priests can preach your dominion and help spread your dominion. I haven't really mentioned dominion yet, but that's a pretty important part to this game, because while you're spreading your, you know, military control, you're also spreading your dominion, which is essentially like your religion. Okay, we have a druid. So this is the first time we've seen this. Air mage level 1. He can do level 1 air magic, which isn't very impressive. And he also gets a random ability. He gets to roll on this chart, so sometimes you'll see multiple lines on these charts. But basically how you read this is there's 100% chance that he gets something from this line. So he gets 1 level in one of these 3 abilities. So that's water, earth, and nature. So he's going to be a level 1 air mage and level 1 something else. Not very powerful. He can research new magic abilities at a rate of 9. And a research of 9 for only costing 70 gold. I haven't seen many units with that can research, or that are cheaper than, like, you know, 1 research per 10 gold. So that's actually a pretty efficient researcher, and that's probably what I'll use this for. Fomorian Druid. Was that last guy a Furbog Druid? Like I said, it's kind of like an analog, you know, you get Furbog and a Fomorian of each type. So he's a better air mage, also a level 1 priest. Similarly rolls on a chart. It looks like instead of earth he can roll death though. Researcher, but not a great one. He can lead some magic units, but he doesn't have much leadership ability. He can also lead a little bit of magic units. Neither of these guys are good leaders really, they're just mages and researchers. Speaking of which, we don't really seem to have many powerful mages yet. So, I think this is the first Numidian we've seen. And pretty weak mage. Level 1 priest. Researcher. Stealthy though, quite stealthy. Glamour. Glamour makes them... well, let's see. They cannot be detected while moving in their own lands and are very difficult to spot when hiding in enemy territories. So I guess that even buffs stealth even further. So I don't know if owned lands are by dominion or by military ownership, but they'll be invisible in our land, which isn't a big deal for a scout, since he'll probably be stealthed anyways. But on the battlefield, what Glamour does is there's like a false image of them beside them, and I think the enemy has to hit them to like dispel the image, so it kind of like eats up the first attack if I'm not mistaken. They have Dark Vision and Spellsinger. I don't remember what this does. Okay, so it takes longer to cast spells, but it causes less fatigue. That's one of the things about spell casting, is all spells cost fatigue instead of like mana, and also fighting increases your fatigue. And once you hit certain values, different things happen. Like I think at 100 fatigue you faint, and I think after 200 fatigue, every additional fatigue is just hit points. So you start taking damage. He has a golden sword, so sword itself does 7 damage, and it does both slashing and magic damage. The way that works is each hit it just randomly chooses one of the two. So it does the whole hit as one type of damage, but different hits it can like alternate. So that was the champion. We also have a Numidian sorceress. Not a great mage. So typically these mages that you get as commanders, level 3 is like about the highest you get. Sometimes level 4, especially like something like this where you can random into it. So we got 2 air, 2 death. This is really our only decent sorcerer, mage of any sort so far, and it's pretty expensive. We'll still probably want some to cast spells on the battlefield. But let's see, they get random magic skills, so they'll get something from this line, so they could go up to 3 in one of these abilities, or they could get water or nature. And then there's a 10% chance they get to roll in this line. Once again, researching, stealthy, glamour, dark vision, and spellslinger. I'd be interested in how much less fatiguing and how much more time it takes to cast. Or if it's like twice as long to cast but half the fatigue. And here, level 3 air, level 2 death, and we could potentially go to level 5 air. That would be extremely rare, so that'd take a lot of luck, but if we make a few of these, getting one to a level 4 air mage or level 3 death mage would not be too unlikely. Level 2 priest, some research, really expensive though. Can lead a decent. We don't have any. Our commanders seem kind of weak for this nation. This guy is super expensive, so you wouldn't want to hire a ton of them. But other nations, I mean, it might not be like extremely common, but it's not too rare to have someone who can lead 120 for less than this. Let's see, he's sacred, amphibian, so he can enter water, provinces, shock resistant, cold resistant, sailing. So this is the first one who's we've seen with sailing. So he can move across sea tiles and bring his army with him. So you can bring up to 999 size points with a max size of 6 per each unit. I don't think there are units that are larger than 6 because on the battlefield a single square can hold 6 size points or whatever. So for example, this guy's size 6, only one of him could fit in a square, but 2 size 3 guys could. Anyways, he can take as many people across as long as they don't, all their sizes don't add up to more than 999. And he can also bring 50 size points of people with him underwater. It's not very many people, but you could, you know, form like an elite army, I guess. Still wouldn't be, 50 is just not much. And our units, you can look at them now. Slinger, kind of cheap ranged unit. Not much protection, so they'll die pretty quickly. Fairly cheap soldier, a little more protection this time. Another variation of the Furball Warrior. It looks like this one has a spear instead of an axe. Things like weapon length and doing piercing instead of slashing damage can make a difference depending on what you're fighting. It looks like he has a little more defense. Did the other guy have javelins? No, the other guy didn't have javelins either, so he has probably two javelins he can throw in a fight. Fomoria militia, size 4, pretty large. I think that means they can only fit 1 in a square, which is, the reason that matters is because if 2 size 3 units can fit in a square, so an army of size 3 units, which I think humans are size 2. Yeah. So for example, 3 of these guys could fit in a square, so this guy, if, you know, 2 front lines of armies clashed, this guy would be alone in a square facing off against 3 people. He's got pretty good health and pretty good damage. Let's see, because it's about 50% more damage. Got a javelinist. More protection. Attack and defense skill aren't great. Pretty good damage, and he can throw the javelin before he runs in. We don't really have cavalry, or other than slingers, we don't really have archers in this army. Anyways, here's a spearman. This one has a shield. I don't think the other one did. A little more protection again. Warrior. Better protection and defense yet. Haven't been looking at how much the other ones cost to recruit. Yeah, so progressively get more expensive. I think this is our first soldier with a special trait, so they have glamour, stealthy, and dark vision. Golden spear, so that does magic damage. So this is our first sacred unit we've seen. And sacred units, like I said, can be blessed by your priest to receive your god's blessing, which will add different buffs to them. Quite expensive. I would imagine these can only be recruited at our capital. I think this is probably one of those units that we're that require this. Unmarked Fomorian Giant, Fomorian King. So, pretty good overall. And Sacred, once again, quite expensive. Then another Sacred unit, very expensive, very large. Amphibian, Cold Resistant, Dark Vision. So he has a ton of health. I'm going to thumb through them again real quick to kind of look at the cost of units, get an idea of what we'll be spending. Okay, looks like it's generally the amount of resources and recruitment points are fairly balanced. So now we get to design our god. So I'll try to go through this in a way that explains it in kind of a logical order. We have so many points to spend. This works like a lot of other RPGs would work. You can add, you can add positive modifiers to your character by spending points, and there are sometimes options to take on like negative traits to gain more points. So for example, down here we can choose to be awake, dormant, or imprisoned. This means, awake, the god is waiting in your capital at the start of the game. Dormant, it takes a year to arrive at your capital. Imprisoned, it takes 3 years from the start of the game. Let's see, these are the magic paths available. So this is kind of like what kind of magic you can use. So for example, I could up death magic, which costs points, and once you go over 4, you can start spending blessed points. So I have like 9 death points, so I could do death weapons, and it gives me this bonus but only to sacred units that are blessed. You also get to pick your god's physical form, which kind of tells you like what they start with. So here's all the choices I have for this nation. A lot of nations have, overlapping choices, but there's also choices like cold out that don't fit your nation. It is worth noting like what dominion the god is in, so we could just like click on one of these and see what they're like. You can see all their stats here. These are their like base skills that they start with, and all these traits. And then down here, they start with 2 dominion, and it costs 80 points for new magic paths. So if I select him, 80 points is pretty expensive for a new magic path. So if I want to also have water magic, it costs 80 points. After that, it costs less. It's, the normal price to increase your magic skill. But that first one is 80 points because that's what, he has on his character page. And Dominion, he has a base Dominion of 2. This is like how strong or like potent your Dominion can get. It can go up to 10. And your god, your prophet, and your temples spread your Dominion, and your priest can preach it to a single province. And your god gets benefits for being in your Dominion. And I think sacred units get a morale bonus. So typically I want it to be kind of high, like 7 or so. And you can get up to 10 in the game by building temples. So I think it's like every 5 temples increases your max dominion by 1. So after building 15 temples, I could get the max of 10 dominion, in any area, which is the highest you can go. The other benefit of spreading dominion is it tries to influence the land with your scales, so I can make these positive or negative up to, you know, +3 or -3 essentially, and it changes how the you know, the province will be based on these. So I don't know if everything tries to remain neutral without your dominion, or if certain provinces lean toward a certain scale, like, you know, maybe this province is naturally unlucky one. I don't know exactly how it works, but as you exert more and more dominion, it's going to try to change it to the value that you desire. So yeah, you can like raise these and it costs points. You can lower them and it gives you back points. The one exception is heat and cold. Every nation has like a desired heat scale, which can be, you know, 3 heat to 3 cold. And that's their like neutral point, and you gain points for moving in either direction. Most nations are 0, but there are ones that prefer heat or cold. So there's kind of 3 ways to build a god. You can build them for scales to manipulate the land as much as possible. You can build them to be a magic user and also have a really strong bless if you want to use a lot of sacred units. Or you could build them to be a combatant, which would typically be giving them a fair amount of magic. So let's look at our sacred units again. They're pretty expensive. I don't know if we'll be fielding tons and tons of them. So I'm probably going to do kind of like a hybrid between the scales, which is what these are called, and magic. First things first though, we need to pick a god. So let's see, we're focused on air and death magic. We don't necessarily have to have our god use those abilities though. You'll notice some of these are reduced for our nation, and I think it just means that they're strongly like tied to things in our nation. So this looks very much like one of our king of Fomoria. He has sailing, gift of water breathing, amphibian. I don't see a mention of Fomoria in here, but yeah, he really looks like our units. Except he's not, doesn't have the like goat head. I guess this guy doesn't either. He's not cursed yet. So that's a strong option. New magic paths cost 60, so that's pretty expensive, so we probably would stick with these 3. Maybe the first thing we should do is look at if there's any bless effects we want. Oh, one other thing. Let me find the key. F5, so we can also look at spells, and these blue ones are ones that are unique to our nation. So here's we have these huge lists of spells for this game, and you can see like what you need to cast it on the side and how many gems if that's applicable. Conjuration almost always uses gems. And yeah, in the game we'll be researching these schools, so when you get to level 1 you get all of these. Of course with our nation the death ones are pretty much the only ones that are useful because we don't tend to have nature or earth mages for the most part. So let's see, we can summon black dogs. Bar guests. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. I don't think I've ever heard this word actually spoken. So this sounds like the same thing but larger. Oh, and they're sacred. That is neat. So we could have a bunch of level 2 death mages summoning these for us so we'd have more sacred units. Also, summoned units do not require upkeep if I am not mistaken. They require food or supplies, but not gold and upkeep. So this requires an air magic, so yeah, we have people who can do that. They're not going to give us spells we can't cast, of course. They are also sacred. So it's worth mentioning, spells with this icon beside them are ritual spells, and they're cast on the world map. So that means we're going to summon these, and they're going to be like permanent additions to whatever army we summon them to. Something like Summon Sprites is cast on the battlefield, and it's probably just temporary things that won't last past the battle. So let's go check the other ones to make sure they're permanent summons. Yes. So we can summon 2 types of sacred units already. That takes a lot of fatigue, but remember we have, what were they called? Songcasters or something that reduce the fatigue. So normally 400 fatigue is absolutely crazy amount of fatigue and a long cast time, so it looks like that's a cheaper way to summon them, but oh, that requires a lot of death and air magic, so we'd have to empower a mage, which is very expensive, or our god would have to summon them. Usually, unique spells are focused in one school, so we might not see any others. Okay, I might actually go a little more leaning toward bless effects and focus on summoning those sacred units. Let me look real quick. View all possible bless effects B. So I think we're going to go air and death, like our nation is focused on. And actually, I want to check one thing real quick. So it summons 9. Sometimes these things have, I'll try to find one, something like this, where it says effects are increased by 1 for every extra level the caster is. So I was going to see if we might want to like really buff our caster or our god on a death magic so you could get that extra effect and be more efficient, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Anyone who can cast it equally as well. Anything that says incarnate only means our god has to be alive to gain this benefit. I'd go for swiftness and shock resistant, I'm not sure. Possibly, what's charged bodies do? Okay, so they both get hit by electrical damage. So if you did this, you'd want to get shock resistance. and maybe see if your mages could cast a buff that improves shock resistance. So you would kind of negate it, but every time someone hit you, they took damage. That could be interesting. Take this and shock resistance. That might help negate the fact that I have some giants. I have that one. Well, yeah, I have two giant size 4 and size 6 sacred units. And even though they're outnumbered, hopefully the other people would be striking them and be taking electrical damage. I think that sounds interesting. I might actually try that. And then for death magic, let's see, frighten nearby enemies. That's very expensive, 10 points. I'm not sure what 8N damage is. This could be interesting if I don't know if these units are considered undead. Using death magic, I would assume so. Beings of death and destruction. Are Barghest considered undead? Probably not. How many of these do we summon? Is that just a single one? Summons one of the Morgans. Level 6 Conjuration, that could take a little while to research all the way up to that. Okay, so that would be good for Morgans, but not my other units. This one could also be fun. We would, as we killed units, there's a 50% chance they would rise on our side just for the battle. I think that sounds really fun. Let's see what else though. Resistance to non-magical damage. That sounds really powerful. I'm not sure exactly what the effect of this is. We'll get Decayed. I don't know exactly what Decayed does. We might want Undead Command. How much? Let me go look at our nation real quick. Okay, we have some undead leaders. These guys are sacred, not sacred. So we could turn these into better undead leaders. This guy. Plus 20. I don't know how many of those guys we can summon. If we summon Morgans one at a time, we probably don't need this. Okay, so I think we want charged bodies, shock resistance, minor shock resistance. It's kind of a lot. And we want, I think, reanimators, maybe undead commander, undying, or both. We'll try to go heavy on death and air and maybe pick up a third. Let's see who can actually... So we need someone who starts with those because we want to spend a lot of points leveling up death and air magic. So one of these two guys are potential. I think I would like someone with a decent amount of health, like one of these guys, not like the Demi-Lich that can't move and has no health. So I can bring them to combat, because I'd like to try that ability to let you summon Morgans or whatever during combat. Let's just peek at all these guys though. And I'm just glancing at magic abilities to see if they have a potential to be one of our choices. Stuff down here tends to be pretty weak, so I don't think there's much point looking out after them. If you don't want them to be in combat though, they're really cheap to add new magic paths to these guys down here, so that's kind of what they're used for. And you can make someone with like a really good bless effect, or really good at casting ritual spells. So I think it's going to be one of these two people, so let's... This person's cheaper, so might be him, but let's check him out. So we get Astral. They're a terrible researcher, so they wouldn't be doing that. Scares enemies. Flying. Likes Turmoil. Turmoil and Unrest. I'm a little confused. Does this mean I have 3 of these units? Well, I'm going to read this real quick. The Morinia is a tripartite entity of divine heritage. She is one with her sisters, and her sisters are one with her. The Trinity was given power and purpose by a previous Panto creator. One sister was given mandate over battles. One sister was given mandate over life and death. One sister was given mandate over the fates of men. She was the battle crow, witnessing the slaughter and the dying, pecking, blah 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 blah. I don't quite get it. I don't know if you get like 3 of these units, which would be pretty cool because they could all cast spells at the same time. And that would explain the high cost. So what does this guy have going for him? We get water instead of astral magic. He is stealthy, glamored, boat, dark vision, gift of water breathing. Tough choice. Let's look at if there's a... if we prefer water or astral. Defense skill. Water walking. Cross rivers. Yeah, I don't think that's too great. Well, I say that because I'm not sure if a sacred commander can bring all his units with him or just the sacred ones. Magic resistance, that's pretty neat. I'm gonna go with him just for the point economy reason. I'm gonna kind of focus heavily on Bless, so I think it would make sense to go with him. I'm gonna start out Dormant. I might go to Imprisoned. So let's see. I want to go ahead and up my Dominion some. Then let's start giving him some Death and Air. Let's bring Water up to 4. So that's really expensive already. He's not cheap. 280, that's already really expensive. Let's see, we want a Reanimator. Charged Body. Minor Shock Resistance. Major Shock Resistance. This is gonna might get prohibitively expensive. Then probably just defense. Not a cold resist. Is there something else? Stygian Flesh was the other thing I was considering. Resist. So I think that means they just flat out ignore the first 10 damage of any physical attack. Oh, this is really hard to decide. Let's throw that up there and look at them. It's cheaper, which is good for us. I don't know what would be better, not a lot less likely to die, or just like turning the tide of battle with like a wave of units. I'll go with Stygian Flesh. Something tells me Reanimators probably doesn't even res them as strong as they were when they were alive. And I want to get Undying and... I don't know about Undead Command. We'll skip Undead Command because we're already short on points. So we can make this work with imprisoned. That means for 3 years that we don't get this benefit. Guess we'll just have to roll with that though. And we can spend a few points here. We can pick like one of these. I don't think I've ever played a god with this few in skills. So let's see, what do we want? Or is there something in water that'd be worth getting? I don't think so. Maybe just put it in luck. At least I won't have as many negative events. Or magic. We'll just do that. So we're going bless heavy, and I'm hoping this works for this nation. I'm not exactly sure. Okay, so we need a name. I don't have any great ideas. We'll just go with that. So, some more game options. Ones I guess kind of unrelated to the map. I'm going to keep these mostly the same. Starting province is 1, strength of independence 5, such and such and such. I will turn renaming on. I probably won't bother. That just allows you to rename your units, your commanders in particular. So random start research. If you turn that off, you start with a little bit of research into magic. This evenly distributes it across different schools. This just randomly picks ones to fill in first. I guess I'll just leave it like that. I normally do this because it's kind of balanced, but that should be fun. I am going to change this. So here's the victory condition. Very quick explanation. Conquer all is pretty self-explanatory. Destroy all other nations, either by military or dominion victory. Military just means conquering all their provinces. Dominion means completely removing their dominion from the map, so basically no one believes in their god anymore. I'll come back to this one because that's what we are going to play. Dominion just means spreading your dominion. So far you acquire a certain number of points. It's 10 points for having or controlling a province by your dominion, plus 1 point for each candle in it, which is like the strength of your dominion. So that means the province will be 11 to 20 points, depending on how much dominion you have in it. Conquer so many provinces. And I guess that's military conquest and not dominion. Acquire so much research. Sounds really boring. So Thrones of Ascension is like conquest, maybe you'd call it. There are these thrones scattered around, and you have to capture them. You can only capture them with your pretender god or a level 3 priest. You probably remember we don't have any level 3 priests, so we can appoint one of our priests as a prophet, and then he will turn into a level 3 priest. So that means our prophet and our Pretender Guard are the only ones that can capture thrones. Capture so many points to win. They're level 1, 2, and 3 thrones. Level 2 thrones are worth 2 points, 3 are worth 3. What I'm going to do is just set it to 5 thrones, but we only need 4 to win. I don't really like to drag a game out if you're obviously going to win and there's one throne out in the ocean and you don't have like a good water army to take it with or something like that, so 4 or 5 is good in my opinion. I've never played with Cataclysm enabled, but after so many turns something terrible happens which basically like forces the game to end in like the coming turns. So yeah, so pretty standard game. Really all I changed was the Thrones of Ascension, and renaming doesn't affect balance. So let's get started and generate the world. Okay, so here's the message screen we will see at the beginning of each turn that details what happened in between turns. This game is turn-based, but all turns are resolved simultaneously, if that makes sense. Basically, everyone queues up their turn, what they want to do, and then they all play out at the same time, and everyone gets to see the results. So it's not like I attack someone, it resolves the battle, and in my turn, and then they play their turn and attack some people and resolves those battles. Everyone moves at the same time, so it's kind of interesting because sometimes you can move to somewhere you think is empty, but someone else could move into that province the same turn you end up fighting. Anyways, here's just a little bit of lore. If you want to read it, I'll let you pause. But basically it says that, you know, I think I mentioned this earlier, but the Supreme God disappears and the world's in chaos and all these pretender gods arise and are vying for power. I sort of interpret this as the game is cyclical, and you know, your last game, the victor, is the Pantocrator, and then he leaves, and that's why the new game's starting. I'm gonna end this episode soon, but we'll just look at the map real quick. Just so you know what we've been building up toward. So, let's see, map filters, I always like to turn these on, Dominion candles, income box. So we get this little info. This purple flag with a gray border, that indicates we control it, you know, our military controls it. This is our capital. You can tell it because it's called Fomoria, which is our nation. It took me a while to figure that out. The outline is our dominion. It will spread because we have a temple here. So like next turn you might see it take one of these adjacent lands because it kind of flows out like a fluid. This is a Throne of Ascension, so we start right next to one. We probably can't take it too quickly because usually there are neutral armies. We don't have like any intel on these surrounding lands, but there will be neutral armies in them that we have to defeat to expand. Usually the ones here are 2 or 3 times larger than your typical just run-of-the-mill area. So it looks like a pretty good start. We kind of have this defensive area. You know, no one can cross through the river. So, you know, we're kind of backed on a peninsula. Let's scroll out and look at the map. So, it does go around like this. It's not going to be a big deal for most because unless you can get through the water, you can't really travel across. If you remember, we do have sailing, so for us, we could launch, you know, we could hire Fomorian kings and send an army with them across the ocean and like launch an attack over here. So we see the 5 thrones. Sorry about that, I'm back. We see the 5 thrones. And we'll have to take 4 of them. These 2. Maybe this one. Some of our units, I think our Fomorian king might have been the only one, and our god, they could bring some units underwater with them. Sometimes you can also hire units not from your nation. Usually they aren't very good, but sometimes you'll conquer a coastal region which will allow you to hire amphibious units, so we could start training them up to take this if no one gets there before us. If someone gets there and starts building up a naval army before we get there, it could be difficult to take. Then we'll have to get over here and take one of these if we follow the route of taking these 3. Probably this one. We could always launch a ship, and actually we might be able to do this without taking too much land if we go vertically, take a ship over here and try to just grab this right at the end. So looks like we're kind of poised for an easy victory, but then again there's probably someone up here already. So I'd say there's probably a capital like right here, probably one down here, and who knows where the last one is. So we're still gonna have to fight people off to get to these, I'm sure. This is a cave. I don't remember everything a cave does, but some races have special units you can like hire in caves and stuff like that. Anyways, I'm going to hop off now, and next time we'll actually start playing and conquering stuff and whatnot, so I'll see you then.